So let me tell you what you're actually going to receive. So you'll receive the actual jig itself, which this is the way it looks. It has the rod end bearing here at the end, a jam nut to secure that rod end bearing. Now this rod end bearing is threaded onto the threaded rod pretty much all the way. I backed it off a couple of turns and then secured it down. So if you ever run into a situation where you need a little bit more length, you got about 1 inch more of playroom here. Then it has this other jam nut that basically secures the threaded rod, this whole thing, against this tube end weld nut that has this conical area and this straight area here. Go into a little bit more detail here in a second on that. And then it's pinched between the seat blank from this other tube nut coming up from the bottom, and it has this conical end, so it kind of goes into the hole from the bottom and secures everything. Let me grab one of these over here so I can explain this tube end weld nut to you. I've come across these before, and that's what led me to this. I looked at all kinds of different mechanisms and expanding nuts, expanding plugs, and none of them would work because I wanted something that you could work from, you know, just the top of the seat, or the bottom in this case, down without having to go underneath the seat. But I couldn't find anything that would work that would be both economical and easy to use. So this seemed to be the best bet. And when I started looking at these tube end weld nuts, I found that this particular tube end weld nut has an outside diameter of about, I think it's 0.98 inches, but this is a 1 inch hole. It fits nice and snugly into that 1 inch hole. At first I thought I could pinch this between the two ends like this, and that would pinch between the seat. But what I soon realized is that works great where you're at 90 degrees, but as soon as you're at an angled hole, you can cinch that down at all kinds of different angles other than the angle you're looking for. So what you really needed is this almost 1 inch diameter to fit in here, so that when you cinched it down from underneath, that it would stay at the angle of the hole. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the configuration that I have here. So this goes into the top of the seat, and then this comes up and cinches it from the bottom. Now I'm making these videos after I've done the demo, all my demo videos of putting this together. This is basically something I just made up. It's a real thin seat blank. I guess it's more of Chris Schwartz's stick chair from bullshit type stuff. But by the way, the minimum thickness for being able to utilize this is 1 inch and 3/16. So 1 3/16 of an inch is the minimum thickness of your seat blank. So almost any seat blank is going to be thicker than that. So it shouldn't be an issue there. Now on this demo, like I said, I'm using 1 inch dowels as my legs. I'm using 5 1/4 inch dowels as these stretchers. And you would never do this in real life. I'm using a 3/8 inch dowel as this H stretcher here. But this is probably the most complicated undercarriage to set up, is the H stretcher. If you're doing a box stretcher, it's dead simple, and the simplest way ever to do a box stretcher. But you'll see all that in the demos. So the other thing you're getting, speaking of H stretcher, is this H stretcher fixture. And this is something that you just clamp on to the side of the seat, and you use a center line drawn across the seat to line this groove up. And you clamp this on here, and then you simply put the jig into here and set the height, and you're able to drill this. So a couple of things that I'm including that are handy, and that is what I am calling a nut driver. And this basically, when you're trying to cinch this from underneath the seat, you know, you can spin it like that and that's fine, but that gets tedious after a while. What this does is this is a 1/2 inch conduit, so it fits, the inside diameter fits over the threaded rod, and it fits nicely into this little recess into these tube end weld nuts. So you can simply just, and the reason I got this piece of tape is you don't really need it, but it makes it fit into the socket a little bit better. And this is a 13/16 inch socket, and you can just put that in there and drive it up like that, or drive it down. The other thing that is handy to have, now I will be including this, I will not be including the socket. The other thing that's handy to have is adjustable wrench, or just a standard 3/4 inch wrench that interfaces with both these jam nuts and the actual rod end bearing if you need to. The other thing you will be receiving is this 18-inch drill extension, and this accepts 1/2-inch shanked bits. Also have adapters to both do 1/4 inch hex shanked bits or 3/8 inch shanked bits. With that, I'll turn you over to the demos. This is the first setup. So the most important part here is we're gonna first be drilling into the front legs, but I wanna show you how I set the height of the jig. There's many ways to do it. This is just the one that, I don't know, I like anyway. But I have the rear leg in here, and what I have done is, for clarity's standpoint, for some stuff we're going to be doing later with drilling an H stretcher, I have removed most of the sight lines, but I have left a little bit of the sight lines here. So what I like to do is I mark the location of the mortises. In this particular case, it's 10 inches from the bottom of the seat, and I just use a scribe to mark that, so it's exactly 10 inches high from the bottom of the seat. Of course, at the angle of the leg, that distance is going to be a little bit more than 10 inches. So what I like to do is I like to go from the sight line to the mark with my pair of large dividers, and then I keep this in place, and then this is what I'm going to use to set the height of the jig. So let me remove this and put the front leg on, and then we'll go into drilling our mortises. What we need to do now is set the height of this jig. So it just fits in here like so. And then we will take our dividers here, and against where we have the sight line and up to here, and just kind of want to get it in the middle of that, and still need to come up some, getting close, and maybe up just a little bit. Just kind of want to get it in the middle. We're doing chair making here, so it doesn't have to be too exacting. I think, of course, I make it too exacting. So, all right, let me double check everything. That looks to be about right. Now we're gonna leave these here. So we still got this leg over here to do. Don't want to mess those up. So I just get that hand tight for right now, and I'll tighten it up further once we get the other weld nut on from the bottom. So let me step in front again. All right, so now we need to put this weld nut on. Now, this is not the greatest solution, but I think it's the best solution as far as being economical and easy to do. So you just got to thread that nut on and then spin it up. Now, there are two ways to spin it up. You can hold, once you get it up in there, you can hold the threaded rod and just kind of do this motion, and it'll go up pretty quickly. The other and better solution, I think, is to use this. This is my nut spinner. So I just put that here. Oops, helps if I got it going in the right direction. And then there we go. Now it's not all the way tight, it's just right there at it. So now what we want to do is we want to spin this rod end bearing where it's pointed towards the leg we're going to drill in. And it doesn't have to be precisely pointed because we have about a 30 degree one way, 30 degree the other way, so about 60-degree range here. So it just has to be pointed in the general direction. Now I'm going to tighten this up from the bottom. Just make sure it's good and snug. Then I want to double check that we're doing good. Yep, we're doing good there. Now at this point, I want to tighten that down. It might have moved or thing, but it's still pointed in the general direction. Just make sure everything's tight. Double check. See what I mean by the 30 degrees, you can easily double check by just turning it this way and making sure everything's in line with that sight line. So we're good to go. Okay, this is the underside of our seat blank. So let me show you what's going on here. So I'm gonna just go put the jig. So this is going into the top of the hole like this. And here's the bottom of the hole. So we got the conical section of the weld nut going on like that. So you can just spin it on like this. This is the nut driver working. And then basically then you just hand tighten it till it's tight. And then to remove it, same thing. Just remove it till it's loose. And you can put this back on here. I always like to, don't want this falling on the ground, so it usually stops spinning right when it gets close to the end. So there we go. So that's basically what's happening on the underside of the seat when I'm putting that weld nut on and off the threaded rod. Okay, so the next operation we're going to do, as I said, we have marked the height 10 inches off the bottom of the seat, but we have not marked the center. So we are going to use our center finder to do that. And that's this handy little device here. Now, we have our 18-inch extension. We have our 5/8" drill bit fitted in here, and I got a stop collar. You can use a piece of tape, whatever. And basically, I'm going to take the end of our extension and put it through there, and then on the back end of the center finder, you got a little hole. It'll slip right onto that. And then I have a pencil. It doesn't have to be this short. And then I basically just center this where it's riding in the direction of the leg, and then I can make a mark, and right there is the center mark. So then I can take a awl and make a little pinprick there, or you can just use a drill bit. Now we're basically ready to drill this. So that out of the way. That over there, make sure that doesn't shift on us. Excuse me, I want to reach over here. Okay. Then I'll put this over here. Now, I like to just hold the top of this leg. And then and there you go. Now, the only thing that I do want to note, and I should have said this earlier, is that when you do this, when you lock this thing in, it is pivoting just a tad here. And basically what that does is move this along the sight line just a touch, about a quarter to half a degree that way. What I've discovered is that will put off the actual aim point of where you're drilling by 1/32. So it'll be like if you were drilling straight down the sight line, then you would be drilling basically 1/32 higher than you should be. I don't think that's a big deal. In all the testing I've done, it's not a big deal. And especially when you're not along the sight line and you're drilling this way, that error is even less. So I think it's minuscule that you're not even going to notice it. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there to be fully transparent in everything I found. Okay, let me show you about removing the jig. All you basically want to do is just unscrew it by hand a little bit. Now you can then just use this, make sure it's going in reverse, put it up, and it will unscrew. And there you go. And then just lift it out. Okay, now we're ready to set up to drill into the rear dummy leg here. Pay no attention to this mortise. I'm reusing this leg from another test run I did when I was developing this one. So anyway, so we have our jig here. Now the one thing I want to do is go ahead and loosen this nut up, because this is going to change. And behind the scenes, I already set the height of calipers for the front legs in the same manner I did for the rear legs that I showed you. So let me see here towards the sight line. Need to come down some, which makes sense because these front legs have much less of a resultant angle than the rear legs. Okay, I just want to lock this down just a little bit, and then I'm showing this to you kind of out of order. Normally I would drill both rear legs and then both front legs, so that way you only have to change the setup once. But you know, you change it once for the drilling from the two rear leg positions, and then you change it again from drilling from the two front leg positions. But this is a demo. Okay, now that we got our height set, it's time to install our nut. Now remember, we are installing it like this, where the conical end is going towards the straight end. Get that in there. And thread this in. Like I said, we just need to get it pointed towards the general direction of that leg. And you can flip over here. Just double check, make sure everything's tight. Make sure we're pointed in the general direction of the leg. All right, now we need to mark the center of the leg. So, got that there. Sorry, this is a little bit awkward trying not to step in front of the camera and do this, but let's see here. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we just need to mark the center there. Okay, now we're ready to drill. By the way, 3/4 inch dog holes are nice for storing the drill extensions. that sighted in. Hopefully this doesn't look too awkward, because it is kind of awkward without me stepping in front of the camera to do this. So, got that. So I just want to hold on to the leg here and drill. And there we have it. My buddy John Hammock has run the guide through its paces and built a few stick chairs using the guide with excellent results. John also showed me this technique for using the stick chair bushing for through stretcher mortises. This allows you to use the through mortises that you drilled in one set of legs to drill the opposing stretcher mortises in the other set of legs. Okay, I use a bamboo skewers technique to measure and cut the stretchers, and they are in, and you can see how perfectly level everything is, exactly 10 inches above the seat. Let me get a level and I'll show you just how accurate this is. This is an extremely accurate plastic level, but anyway, it does have a groove in here so I can lean it against this, but if you can see there, it's pretty much in the center. And then if I take it up here and place it in there, you can see again, it's in the center. And we can do the same thing over here. You can see right there, it's in the center. And, well, I should probably do it this way so it fits in the camera view. So hopefully you can see that. And again, here we are in the center. So with that, you can see how accurate the jig is and how easy it is to use. And let me go on from there. So our next step is I'm going to be measuring and showing you how we do an 8 stretcher. Now, of course, if you were doing a box stretcher, it's just rinse and repeat as far as what we did in the front and back legs. The only caveat is go ahead and put your stretchers in your front and back legs before you drill. So basically, if I was doing a box stretcher, I would take off these pair of legs and then drill that way into these pair of legs with the stretcher in place, and then repeat the process for the I guess this would be the left-hand side of the leg. So anyway, drilling a box undercarriage is even simpler. Just repeat the operations used to drill the side stretchers for the front and back stretchers. Just make sure the side stretchers are mounted in the legs when you drill the mortises in the front and back legs. This ensures that the legs are in the proper orientation and everything will fit together nicely. Okay, now it's time to work on the 8 stretchers. So what I have done, and we need to do a little layout before we can actually drill for it. So what I've done is I have marked, hopefully you can see this, I've marked the center, the inside center of both of these stretchers. I want my 8 stretcher to be right in the middle of these 2 stretchers. So, you know, if you wanted it to one side or you wanted to do double, you could do all that measurement there. But what I'm going to do now is simply transfer that mark down to the seat. So I'm just going to put that there and put a little mark there, and then I'll put this here and put a little mark there. So now I got 2 marks corresponding to the center of those stretchers. So I'm going to take a rule or any straight piece, strike a line all the way across the seat. So here's how this H stretcher jig works. So Basically, it has a hole in here for the jig to go into, and then it's got this straight edge here, and that just references on that line that we made. You simply clamp this into place, mount the stretcher jig in here, and set the height, and then you can drill right into that. So okay, now it's time to drill our center H stretchers. So what I have is I have the seat blank with the one set of legs with this center stretcher in there. I've actually glued this in. If you don't want to glue it in, that's fine. Just make sure when you're drilling you hold that center stretcher so it doesn't rotate on you. So the first thing we need to do is set the height. Now, so we're going to have our jig resting on this, so it's going to raise it up the height of this 3/4 inch, nominal 3/4 inch plywood. So basically what we want to do is use that as an adjustment to help set our height. Now this is just our gross height setting. So it looks like if we put this on here, we're about 9 3/8. 9 3/8. We'll go with 9 3/8. So next step is go ahead and mount this. Now it has this V-notch here. That's just so you can see, and this is straight. That is straight in line with the center of this hole here. So you just want to line that up and then clamp the fixture in place. Now I do have this seat blank raised up on hockey pucks, just so that, you know, that extends a little bit more than the seat blank. So, all right. So we are centered. So we just need to put this in here. And then I'm going to just go ahead, I'm not going to cinch it down, I'm just going to thread the weld nut on here. And let me loosen this up. So I can move that. So we want to get to 9 3/8. I think that's about it right there. Okay, now we need to go ahead and prove that. So the first thing we need to do is mark a center line. Even if we're not directly on it, we'll be close enough. Put that in there. And now what I'm going to do is rotate this like that so it is perpendicular. Move that in there. And mark that center line. Mark here. Now I am going to drill a 3/8 inch stretcher. You would never do that, but since this is a dummy 5/8 inch stretcher, I don't think 1/2 inch would work very well, let alone 5/8. So I'm going to go with 3/8. So let me get that set up and I'll get right back to you. Okay, I have my 3/8 inch bit. Actually, this is a star M bed. It's 9.5 millimeters, which is like a couple of thousandths from 3/8 inch. And I have a little adapter that fits in these extensions that handles 1/4 inch hex shank bits. So I've loosened this up a little bit, and I'm just going to put this in the little pinprick I made where our center hole is. And I want to put a level on it. You can use electronic level or something. And we are just a little bit too high on this side. So this is a one-time adjustment because it's going to be the same on the other side. So let's move that down 2 turns and see where we are. This is kind of the fiddly part of this, but I say it's fiddly. We did it right there on the first try, so tighten everything up and then triple check. Got a stop collar on this, so should be good to go now. So basically it's the same thing. It's rinse and repeat. Put that in there and we just drill away. Okay, there we go. Not very deep, but this is demo purposes only with. Okay, here we are with our little 3/8 stretcher installed. The legs are all back in, so let's see how we did. Everything seems to be pretty close to 10 inches above the seat. And if we look at our level here, we're right there. And if we put it on there, we're right in the middle. Hopefully you can see that. So, like I said, it's real easy to do. It's very accurate, and what more can you say? Thanks.